And do you know what? Like, honestly, this might sound a bit strange, but half of the reason why I like going to these games, it's not even about the football. It's just like,
yes, I agree.
It's the togetherness, and it's like the sense of community.
Welcome. You're listening to the Getting to Know You podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm Anthony.
Today, we're going to take you on a journey of us getting to know each other. So we visited the Stadium of Light, of course, the famous ground of Sunderland AFC. In this episode, we're going to be speaking about the history of football in our lives and how it ties into the rich history that Sunderland has with the football team. So let's go to the stadium.
We're at the stadium today.
Yeah.
Essentially, we were trying to find what is it that we can like talk about. Something that is so like Sunderland, but also so us.
Yes, that's right.
And like,
yes.
Really, you can't get more Sunderland than the Stadium of Light, can you?
Correct. And it was an extra challenge, which we're very different people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
we're very different generations for one thing, and we come from different parts of the UK.
I think it's interesting as well. Why I like being here and why I sort of wanted to go here. It all started a few weeks ago. So Sunderland recently played Derby County, and it was 2-0 victory. It was great.
Right.
And it was actually my first game, despite the fact that I've been in Sunderland for sort of like over a year now.
Okay.
Like about 13, 14 months.
Right.
It was my first game that I went to, and I actually really enjoyed it. There was, so the stadium's recently got a new like lighting rig set up, and there was sort of like this light show before the game. And it was just amazing. I'd never seen anything like it at a football game before. And you know, I think especially for me, it was like it just awoke, like, it reawakened this like electricity inside me that I hadn't really felt since I used to go to football games when I was a kid. It's the second game that I've been to in about 10 years.
I see.
The last game that I actually went to, the first one in about 10 years, was when I went to see Dunfermline play back in Scotland.
Okay.
I think it was about 2,500 people at that game. Still very good.
Yeah.
Still enjoyed it. Coming here though, it was just like a totally different experience.
Yes. Well, I can probably relate more to the Dunfermline.
Oh, okay. Right.
So I have made a point of trying to watch all 92 English league teams. Unfortunately, since then, Harrogate got promoted and I haven't seen them yet, so I'm down to 91. But most of the football I've watched has been at a lower level, and I'm a season ticket holder at York City, who are in what's called the National League, which is the 5th tier. So that's a very different experience, but actually they get good crowds for non-league. The last match I went to was over 7,000 people.
Jeez.
And that's enough to give you a real sense of atmosphere. And to the York City faithful, York City matters quite as much as Sunderland matters to the Sunderland faithful. So I don't think you need tens of thousands of people to get a kind of sense of passion.
You know what, like, I actually agree. I think from the outside looking in, as someone who has sort of got back into football, because for a lot of years, I'm talking like more than 10 years, I wasn't really interested in the sport.
I see.
But at the end of last year, I started to get back into it again.
Right.
So for a lot of years, from an outsider looking in, it seemed to me that Prem was where it was at, and the energy and the passion just wasn't there in lower leagues. But seeing like an English and a Scottish Championship team, and even for yourself, after going to those two games, it's really shown me like just the passion and the energy that is in every league of football. And do you know what? Like, honestly, this might sound a bit strange, but half of the reason why I like going to these games, it's not even about the football. It's just like
I agree.
It's the togetherness, and it's like the sense of community. Where I'm from in Scotland, it's just like a little town. So although Sunderland to many people is like a small city, coming to a city where football is like just so deeply ingrained in the culture, even like if you look at the documentary Sunderland Till I Die, it's really had a profound effect on me. And like, I think it's let me get to know the city more, get to know the people more. What's your thoughts on like has that happened for you? And obviously you've went to a lot more games than me for a lot more years, so what's kind of been your experience with like football as identity, I guess, is where I'm going.
Yes, entirely understand what you're saying, so let me give you a counter case.
Okay.
And I'm not the only person to say this, by the way. I've been to a couple of games at Milton Keynes, MK Dons at the Bowl in Milton Keynes, and there's a saying that MK Dons is no one's first team. Like the people who actually go and watch them, they're really supporters of Arsenal or Tottenham or whatever.
Right.
And it totally feels like that.
Do you think so?
Yeah, so it feels a bit like a permanent friendly fixture there. And although, of course, when there's a goal, people celebrate, you don't sense it means anything to the community.
No.
Whereas a club like Sunderland, whether the club goes up or down matters not just to the football fans, it has an effect on the morale and the economy of the city.
Absolutely.
So I think Milton Keynes is a good test of how actually community really matters. Roots matter. I certainly remember watching the match on the TV, and Sunderland, I believe I'm right in saying, were in the second tier. And Leeds were by far the most hated team in the country, and I think 50 million plus people were supporting
Crazy,
Sunderland.
yeah.
Even to this day, you say Sunderland and I say Jim Montgomery,
Yeah.
because he made the famous double save.
It's crazy how even just like a name, like the name of a place or like even just the logo of the team makes you think about that game, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I think. And you know what? I don't even think it's necessarily related that I follow Hearts now. I went to a game with my dad because he's like a Dunfermline supporter, and like
right.
sort of through the family, that's how I came to be like going to Dunfermline games. We went, and it was actually Hearts that were playing, which was quite interesting when you look back on it now. I went to that game and it was Hearts versus Dunfermline. I think Hearts won 1 now. But my great uncle, he was like a executive at the team. So I remember me being like 9 or 10.
Right.
I was dressed up. I must have been wearing like a smart polo shirt. I got to go into like the executive seats and like have a meal pre-game.
Excellent.
And the guy who got man of the match, I got to speak to him. And I remember this vividly. Before the game, we were in like sort of the dugout.
Yeah.
And I got to shake the Hearts manager's hands, and I'm obviously like, oh, this is so cool. I was only 9 or 10 years old.
Yes, that's right.
And like even now, that's just like it's just a really fun memory for me.
Well, I've got 2 things to say about that. One is that kind of thing matters to children enormously.
Yeah.
I mean, my family, we used to go and watch the Scarborough Cricket Festival where Yorkshire play, and we used to stay, as it happened, in the same hotel as the Yorkshire players.
Oh wow.
And my son came up to the breakfast table one day full of excitement because Tim Bresnan, who was an English Test cricketer, had held the door open for him, and when you're a small kid that matters an awful lot.
Absolutely.
But also when you're a grown-up it matters an awful lot. It's like
you still remember
you try and remain cool and not show that it's so exciting but it's still like, oh, Tim Bresnan held the door open for me.
That's it, and I think as well, like it speaks volumes in the sense that I kind of stopped following the sport around when I was like about 11, 12 for like a long time, and even though I've came back into it now, I've still got that fond memory. I think it's really cool how sport can do that.
I wanted to ask you something. You said something earlier that intrigued me.
Yeah.
You said that by beginning to connect with the football club, you've kind of felt more connection with the city. I think you said you've learnt more about the city.
I think
go on, what kind of, that intrigues me. What kind of things?
So it's kind of hard to explain, but I guess just because of how big the team is and because of how important, now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every single Mackham is a football fan, but a lot of them are.
Yes.
And I think from getting to know like the squad, from getting to know a little bit of the history, I feel a bit more connected, and especially like with radio, the people who are mainly going to be listening to like myself is going to be Mackhams.
Yes.
And if I can understand like what do they like, what do they not like,
yes,
what is important to them, and this is obviously very important to them,
yes,
and as well when the team are doing well, you notice everyone's in a better mood,
yes,
compared to when they're doing not so well.
Well, I sensed all that mood and importance. I've been to one match here many years ago against Chelsea.
All right.
And I sat in the Sunderland end.
Right.
But my son was a Chelsea supporter, so when I got back to the platform of the Metro, I phoned him up and I said, "What did you think of that?" And he said, "I reckon Chelsea were a bit unlucky, like the ref was biased." And I said, "You think the ref was biased against Chelsea?" And all these kind of dozens of young men kind of pricked their ears up and started kind of forming a threatening circle around me until I had to kind of explain that I didn't think.
Yeah. Oh my.
It had gone that way. But it was kind of
a close one.
Slightly tense moment. You know?
Oh, yeah. No, fair enough. Well, yeah, I think it's fair to say, from like having spoken to each other and just sort of from like recollect, like even just this little conversation has sparked like so many memories.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Recollections. I think it's safe to say, I think anyway, that football's definitely played like a big part in our lives.
Oh yes, and you do. It's a funny thing. I think you do. The bad moments like relegation are terrible.
Yeah.
But you do actually, when you have a long-term perspective like this, you actually naturally pick out all the good moments.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that you discard the bad moments, and you stick with the bits where you were just on a high. And there are very few things in life that feel quite as good
As the higher winning that game, eh? That's it.
Now, it strikes me we've been walking around and round the ground.
We
We're
have.
probably on about our third lap, and we haven't actually said anything about the environment. So what I wanted to say was, it's late afternoon on a Tuesday. I'm really amazed at how many people there are around. There are loads of cars. There are kids coming in. I don't know what they're coming in for.
Well, you got the Academy Light just over there.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of them train, actually.
Okay.
Which is really cool.
And there are people in here. We're just going past the ticket office, and there are people buying tickets. So I kind of expected it to be kind of locked up and wait until Saturday before anything happens. But
that's it.
That's not the case, is it?
Yeah, I think the league's on like a little bit of a break right now. But we've been talking about the supportership and like how fiercely loyal and passionate the supporters are, and I mean now like there's no game on and there hasn't been for a week and a half, and still people are here. Kind of just speaks volumes to that, doesn't it?
Now we're different generations, so I think that probably affects the way we see Sunderland. So for me, when I was a boy first learning about football, Sunderland were in the top flight,
right?
But at that point they weren't particularly good, but they were a top flight team.
Still top flight.
But also, it was sort of not that distant memories for other people, the glory days, when of the mid 20th century, where Sunderland had players like Rach Carter,
of course,
and actually won the big, won the top flight championship. And so I obviously don't remember those days. I wasn't around then, but I kind of grew up with this awareness
of the history.
Sunderland were a major club, and I guess you might have a different kind of.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because where I learnt about Sunderland was from the Netflix documentary.
Oh yes,
Sunderland Till I Die.
Yeah,
I remember it coming out. How old was I? I think when the first season came out, I must have been about 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like at that point. I wasn't following football, but I was like, oh, and like I've got a cousin as well who's from near here, and she's a Sunderland fan. So she was telling me, oh, there's this new documentary out. Sunderland's actually pretty good. And I never actually watched it until I came down here for uni.
I see. Right.
And then I watched a couple of episodes, and I was like, this is kind of interesting, And then, like I've said, over the last sort of 12 months. I've gotten slowly more into the team until eventually I went to my first game, and I think for me that kind of solidified, like, if I've got an English team, it is Sunderland,
Yes.
Yes. So I think, I think it's great, and I'm glad that even though we are about in our third or fourth mile here, I've actually really enjoyed it. Just there's a nice energy to this place. It's almost like a kind of energy of a hope,
So you now that you've rekindled an interest in football, by starting to come here, have you bought in? Will it be coming regularly?
I think so. Yeah, I want to get to a couple more before the end of the year. So definitely, and maybe even I could get you along with me.
Yes. Well, I as I say, it's a long time since I've been here.
Yeah.
And I think the mood of the crowd when I came wasn't that great. They were struggling.
Yeah.
It would be kind of nice to come back and watch a crowd in good spirits. I think one thing we share is we watch the football and the players, but we also like watching the crowd and the people around us.
Yeah, it's like people watching, eh?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like I think a part of the experience is just feeling that energy off everyone, and just it radiates, and then like
when someone's got good energy, you've got good energy,
yes.
and then you both got good energy, you know, just it radiates, doesn't it? I feel like through this conversation I've gotten to know someone who up until this point was a classmate, and I feel like I've got a good mate now.
Yeah, thank you. I feel exactly the same. It's been great fun. So I think the moral for us is sometimes doing a university assignment can actually be pleasurable.
It can be something more than just meeting a deadline.
Now, before we sign off, let's just think what we've learnt from our conversation. Stuart, I think I've learnt a lot about your changing relationship, really sort of ducking in and ducking out and ducking in again with football. And I also feel I've learnt more about this city through the way that you've connected with football.
Wow, I'm glad that I was able to sort of communicate that just through a conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot of football history. Like when you were talking about going to all the different league games, like that is some challenge. And I've also gotten to know across your life how football has sort of just always kind of been there. It's been prevalent.
Well, thank you, Stuart, and thank you for listening to this episode of Getting to Know You. It was produced by Stuart Gibson and Anthony Haynes at the University of Sunderland. Our music is from upbeat.io, and you can find more episodes at sparksunderland.com/podcast.